Let's talk about reciprocal teaching, which is a collaborative reading strategy. Reciprocal teaching is going to involve having your students in groups of 4 or perhaps 5. Each group member is going to have a specific role, and these roles are based on the key strategies that strong readers are doing internally each and every time they sit down to read. Number 1, they obviously read, but they're also questioning, clarifying, summarizing, and predicting. So in these groups, students are going to either be the questioner, the clarifier, the summarizer, or the predictor. Let's first look at an example of reciprocal teaching in an 8th grade classroom. In this video, we're going to see how the teacher starts the reciprocal teaching activity, and then we're going to zoom in on a group to kind of see the conversation that they are having. Unfortunately, it's a little difficult to tell exactly what the students are saying. However, I do still think it's pretty clear that they are having a very rich conversation about the text that they just read.
Are you ready for this from the bookmark? Who in here you have a favorite reciprocal rule that you hope I'm going to pick for your number? Okay, Naira, what do you hope it's going to be?
Question.
Okay, so we're going to stop right here. You get a pick because you can't see it. Pick the number. What's it going to be? Okay, flip it. What is it? Okay, 3 is predict. All right, so predict, you're going to be number 3. Naira, pick who is going to be our questioner. 4, you're the questioner. Okay.
No.
What's this one say?
No.
1, you're the clarifier visualizer. And that means 2 is the summarizer. Now look up. When you go to get your ThinkPad, and we should have enough ThinkPads in here today. I know we have iPad cards, but your class, we should have enough. When you go to get your ThinkPad, you're going to get the right color for your job. If you're a predictor, you're going for the orange marker. If you are a questioner, you're going for a blue marker from the box. If you're a clarified visualizer, it's red. If you're a summarizer, it's green. I want this group and this group, go get your ThinkPads and your marker. Go. Got it? So, can everybody see their reciprocal bookmark on their desk? Make sure that it's visible to you. All right. So, here is what I want us to do today. We're going to do a couple different things. Do you remember when we did choral reading? When I read and then I'm going to stop at a certain word and you guys say it? Yeah. We're going to start with that. We're going to read the first section up to the first question. When we get to that question, we're going to stop. At that point, you're going to do one of the sentence starters from your reciprocal rule. You're going to put it on the paper. After we all have that, we're going to answer the question. And then you guys are going to talk about your reciprocal rules in the small group. We good? Thumbs up? Okay, here we go. Amy Tan, born 1952, is an American. Okay, we're going to start again. Okay, Amy Tan, born 1952, is an American writer whose work often provides insight into the experiences of Chinese Americans and mother-daughter relationships. While her parents emigrated from China, Tan herself was born in Oakland, California. As you read, take notes on how the author's use of imagery contributes to the overall tone. I fell in love with the minister's son the winter I turned 14. He was not Chinese, but as white as Mary in the manger. For Christmas, I prayed for this blonde-haired boy, Robert, and a slim, new American nose. When I found out that my parents had okay, I'm going to start again. When I found out that my parents had invited the minister's family over for Christmas Eve dinner, I cried. What would Robert think of our shabby Chinese Christmas? What would he think of our noisy Chinese relatives who lacked proper American manners? What terrible disappointment would he feel upon seeing not a roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, but Chinese food? Okay, stop right here. Write your reciprocal sentence on the paper. Ready? Set, go.
All right, so predict. Go ahead.
Alright, so I'm thinking, based on what my mother said, I predict that my
That makes sense.
because she says that she understood that what she's going through and she had a hard time during the dinner, so I'm guessing she
She went through that.
Yeah.
she probably went through that at least like once.
But she was young.
Okay. Go ahead. Why did she get over her crush on Robert?
I'm guessing she got over her crush on Robert because she
Oh yeah, maybe.
She probably didn't see him as often, or that one conversation. Okay. I put the question I have is why did Dad belch so loud, and was she embarrassed when he did?
Yeah, I can see that.
I just don't know. That's
So let's talk about 4 different ways that we could possibly structure reciprocal teaching in our classrooms, knowing that there are probably even more ways than just these 4. So the first 2 varieties involve doing a whole class reading, like what we saw in the example video. So in the example video, the teacher was doing the reading as a choral reading, and then she had students working in groups of 4. Now there's 2 different ways that we can approach the groups of 4. In one method, you could have the roles remain the same for every chunk. So for instance, if that student was assigned to be the predictor, they are the predictor at the end of every chunk of the reading. The other method would be to have the roles rotate after every chunk. So maybe you have the roll cards printed out and you ask the students to pass the roll cards clockwise at the end of every chunk. That way they have experience playing out each role. The other 2 options are similar, but in this option you have students in a group of 5 and the reading occurs within the group rather than as whole class. Same sub-options would apply here, where the students could remain in the same role for every chunk, or you could have them rotate. So like I said, those are 4 different approaches that you could take to reciprocal teaching, but I imagine that there are far, far more that you could come up with to make it work the best for you and for your students. So when it comes to the steps to implementing this in your classroom, the first is obviously to choose a text. Now, what I love about this strategy is it's going to work well both for fiction texts or for nonfiction. So this is really a strategy that could be used in any content area so long as there's a medium-sized text for the students to work with. Like with any strategy, you don't want this to last too long, so you don't want the text to be too long, but I'd picture a text that they could do cooperative teaching with in about 20 to 30 minutes time. This text is going to need to be chunked so that there are places along the way that students will stop and that they will then practice with these skills. In a nonfiction text, probably great places to chunk the text would be when you come across any subheadings. In more of a literary piece, you might want to chunk the text after major plot elements, such as after the characters are first introduced, and then maybe after a particularly important conversation between characters. But it's absolutely essential that there are chunks to the text. Then you'll want to think about how you want to structure the groups. Do you want to read to your class and have them in groups of 4? Do you want them to read with each other in groups of 5? And then do you want the students to have the same role every time, or do you want them to have those rotating roles? And then lastly, it's hugely important that you model and practice with the students. So maybe this will look like you pulling up the reading on your smartboard in the form of a Google Doc and leaving comments where you're like, all right, now I'm going to be the predictor and I'm going to make this prediction and type that in. Or now I'm going to ask a clarifying question here. Now I'm going to summarize. And what I'll show in a moment too is a rubric that you can use for these roles. And I find what is really beneficial for students is to have them grade you when you're modeling using the rubric. So the remainder of these slides here are resources that you can use to help your class get started with reciprocal teaching. And all of these resources that I'm about to show are linked in Schoology so that you can access them, make your own copies, and make any tweaks that you feel are necessary. So first we have some roll cards. So here is the questioning roll card, and we'll see that some of these questions are at level 1 and some are at level 2. So this is really hitting our inquiry skills really hard. Notice too that these questions could apply to, again, either fiction or nonfiction. So that first question under level 1, what characters or individuals have we been introduced to so far? So characters if we're doing fiction, individuals if we're doing some sort of nonfiction. And then really we can teach them to hone in on level 2 questions where they're making connections, they're making explanations, they have to defend their answers, all of that good stuff. The next role-playing card is for your summarizer. Theirs is pretty straightforward. Their job is to provide a summary of the section. And again, this would work with the word summary for fiction texts or main idea for nonfiction texts. Our clarifier has the job of finding things that were confusing and then researching. So we'll notice that a lot of these are structured, I was confused about such and such, so I looked it up, and now they're going to provide what they learned about that thing. They could also ask questions where they just didn't really understand the meaning of the author, and that could get the whole group talking about that. And then I always love when my clarifiers ask if there was anything else that the group needed to be clarified. Because what one student may need to be clarified, another student might not need that. And then lastly, the last step is always a predicting. So that's where the student starts to look ahead to the next section. And what's really important about the predictor is that their predictions need to be text-based. So we're going to see words in their stems like because, or because of the title of the next section, or because I'm looking ahead and I see this image or this graph or this table, or earlier on the author mentioned this. So it's really important that we're teaching the students to make these text-based predictions and not just these wild and crazy predictions that have no grounding in the text. So I mentioned earlier that there is a rubric. The rubric will look like this. And it breaks down the 4 roles and how to do that in an exemplary, a proficient, a developing, and a beginning method. And again, I love to use this rubric when I am modeling. So I'm going to use some complete bizarro non-examples of predictions where I'm going to make a prediction that has absolutely nothing to do with anything we've seen in the text so that students can see like, ooh, yeah, this is developing, this is beginning, this isn't grounded in the text, so this isn't the style of prediction that we want to see being made in our groups, and this just clarifies the expectations for students before breaking apart into their actual reading groups. All right, everybody, so that's reciprocal teaching. Again, a great collaborative reading strategy. One thing that I absolutely love about reciprocal teaching is not only is it a great reading strategy, it's also a great way of having students collaborate, and it's a great way of honing in on those inquiry skills. So it's really touching upon a lot of our aims, look-fors, and I think it's a really powerful student learning tool.